Penalties that are so massive that there will never be again some punk thinking even once about throwing a Molotov cocktail into a Jewish business or firing at a Jewish school. They will pay a severe price for that. Like so many elites who don't have to feel the effects of their policies, he agrees with them. When he lives in a protected neighborhood, he is surrounded by security. He spent most of his adult life not even living in Canada. He has no idea what it's like to feel endangered in his community. Now, Bissonnette will be eligible for release after just 25 years. That works out to 4 years of jail time for every murder he committed. Think about that for a second. What happened to the principle of proportionality? You get 4 years behind bars for taking the life of another human being? This is insane. I want to thank Dave for his kind introduction and for his service protecting Canadians on the streets for so many years. I also want to thank him for his future work as the Member of Parliament for La Prairie, Atataken. And I want to thank Jacques Pinchot, the next MP for Compton Stansted. Our candidate there is the former Association of Provincial Police Officers of Quebec president and worked in law enforcement for 35 years. Yet another strong conservative voice to bring change and safety to our streets. We have here other candidates: Steve Shanahan, Ronan Reich, Neil Drabkin, Carl Bellet, and former Senator Boisvenu, who is Canada's leading champion for victims' rights. We're joined by many behind me who are members who have been victimized by crime or whose family members have. Canadians are living through a lost Liberal decade. For once safe towns and streets have been hit by a Liberal crime wave of chaos, drugs, and disorder. Our streets used to be safe, places where seniors could walk peacefully and not worry about their safety. Parents would let their children go out and play on the street. In many of our small towns, people didn't even need to lock the doors. Gun crime up 116%, as the government wastes billions of dollars targeting hunting rifles while allowing gun smugglers and gangsters run free. Gang homicides up 78%, auto theft 46%, extortion up an eye-watering 357%, after the Liberals passed a law reducing penalties for extortion with a gun, a reduction in penalties that Mark Carney says he wants to keep. This Liberal crime wave is the direct result of government policies that put the so-called rights of criminals ahead of the rights of law-abiding Canadians, like C5, which allows some of the worst criminals to serve their sentences in the comfort of their living room, only to walk out the front door any time they choose to offend all over again. Then there's Bill C-75, which lets violent criminals go free within hours of their most recent arrest, even if they have hundreds of prior convictions. In fact, police say that often these offenders are released before the paperwork on their arrest is even completed. And Mark Carney has said he will not change any of the catch and release Liberal laws. Like so many elites who don't have to feel the effects of their policies, he agrees with them. When he lives in a protected neighborhood, he is surrounded by security. He spent most of his adult life not even living in Canada. He has no idea what it's like to feel endangered in his community. A perfect example of this catch and release approach is the Liberals' failure to respond to the Supreme Court's decision in the Alexandre Bissonnette case, a man who carried out a vile murder of 6 innocent people, a premeditated attack on peaceful worshippers, gunning them down, execution style. Now, the trial judge in the Bissonnette's case decided that he should not be eligible for parole for at least 40 years. Now, I think that's too little. The judge reached this sentence by applying the Protecting Canadians by Ending Sentence Discounts for Multiple Murderers Act. A previous Conservative government had introduced that act. It was meant to get rid of the bulk discount for multiple murderers that allowed them to serve all their sentences at once. But later on, the Supreme Court thought that sentence was too severe. Let's be clear. The earlier sentence would have allowed Bissonnette to be free after 60 years, and at the age of 60. after 40 years. But the Supreme Court thought that was too harsh. So he kills 6 people, and the Supreme Court thought it was too harsh to have him stay in prison until he's age 60. So they struck down the law. Now, Bissonnette will be eligible for release after just 25 years. That works out to 4 years of jail time for every murder he committed. Think about that for a second. What happened to the principle of proportionality? You get 4 years behind bars for taking the life of another human being? This is insane. And it's not just Bissonnette. It's Justin Bourque, who was convicted for his horrific shooting spree in which he murdered 3 RCMP officers and injured 2 others in Moncton. The trial judge in this case deemed his crimes worthy of 75 years without parole. But following the Supreme Court's decision, he will be eligible for parole potentially after 25 years. Again, 3 RCMP officers dead, their families destroyed, and he will effectively serve 7.5 years for each murder he committed. That means he could walk free on his 50th birthday after taking 3 lives and injuring others. That's why I'm announcing today a Conservative government will reintroduce and pass the law that empowered judges to impose consecutive sentences for killers convicted of multiple murders. The worst mass murderers should never be allowed back on our streets. For them, a life sentence should mean what it says, a life sentence. So the question is, do I respect Supreme Court decisions? The answer is yes. And I also respect the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which guarantees life, liberty, and the security of the person to every single Canadian. That right has been trampled on by the Liberals' catch and release laws that have unleashed crime and chaos in our communities. And I will use Section 33 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to put an end to the Liberal crime and drug wave and to protect law-abiding Canadians against the dangers that are spreading everywhere in our streets. Yes, sir.
On the issue of disorder and chaos, there's been plenty of it in Montreal in the past year and a half from anti-Israel protesters, including recently at Cavendish Mall, where the protesters were able to stay for 2 hours. Police claimed that they couldn't eject them because they hadn't committed a crime, even though there are criminal code provisions that enable them to do so. What would a Poilevre government do to encourage the enforcement of the criminal code in such situations?
Thank you very much. After the lost Liberal decade of crime and chaos and breakdown in our society, we can't afford a 4th Liberal term. We need a change to bring law and order and respect. I want to condemn, first of all, the Liberal approach of dividing Canadians. We see Mr. Carney playing Justin Trudeau's trick of saying one thing to one group and exactly the opposite to another, inflaming sides to cause division while refusing to enforce the law. That will end when I'm Prime Minister. I will say the same thing to everyone, everywhere. And I will stand up for the right of Jewish Canadians to proudly live their lives, practice their faith, and enjoy their freedom. That includes wearing a Star of David, a kippah, or having a mezuzah on the door, and doing all of those things in total security. How? Well, we'll be bringing in tougher laws that crack down on hate-based vandalism, on violence and targeted at places of worship. We will bring in more security for places of worship. And we will deport from Canada anyone here on a visitor visa who carries out any crime. And we will prioritize the deportation of those who carry out hate crimes and violence on our streets. Those who are permanent or citizens who do those things, they will go to jail. And they will also, on top of that, there will be massive, crippling financial penalties for hate-based vandalism. Will be penalties that are so massive that there will never be, again, some punk thinking even once about throwing a Molotov cocktail into a Jewish business or firing at a Jewish school, they will pay a severe price for that. My message to the Jewish community: change is coming, and that change will mean you feel safe, you feel respected, you feel at home again in Canada. Thank you.